Hello everybody, good morning. Hope you're doing well. In today's video I'm going to be talking about antinatalism. And just off the bat, I'm not a nihilistic kind of individual. I'm not so much necessarily someone that doesn't see. I'm not somebody that I don't. It's not that I don't see the joy in life or the potential for humanity, the potential of the future of our planet, but sometimes I just kind of think to myself, would it be better if there was nothing on the planet? Would it be better if there was no life? Would it be better if there was no technology and the things, these very kind of fragile things that we call our societies and our cultures? There has certainly been times in my life where I've questioned what it's all about. What does everything mean? Why are we here? What are we doing here? Why am I here? Why did I have to be born? Why me? Why did it? Why my parents? Why this specific life? Why couldn't I have been born into, a wealthier family? Why couldn't I have been born into a better socio-economic class? Why couldn't I have been more of an intellectual type of person, or someone that was more academically gifted? And not just that, just the general kind of suffering that goes on in the world. Sometimes you just think to yourself, where's the morality of the world? Where's the fairness in everything? It's like, surely, we've had thousands of years to work on our, work on agriculture, work on building ways to sustain ourselves, to make the world a better place, a fairer place for everybody. And yet here we are in 2025, and we still seem to have, in many ways, the same problems that we've always had. Inequalities, the division of wealth, poverty, famine, starvation, malnutrition, diseases. Just the problematic elements of the primitive brain, or the primitive areas of the brain, if you like. And you just think, sometimes you just kind of, I don't know if anybody else does this, but sometimes you just catch yourself thinking to yourself, have we really evolved? How much have we actually really progressed as a species? Yeah, sure, technologically speaking, yeah, we've come on leaps and bounds over the last few centuries, there's no doubt about that. Even within a century, we've moved on massively in so many different ways. So, it's not that, it's not, the thing is, what bothers me is that human nature has so much potential, so much opportunity for change, and to make a difference in the world. And yet, we still see so much suffering, so much greed, so much selfishness, so much apathy, so much carelessness. And I suppose in the end, that's kind of partly why I decided that I didn't really want to have children. I don't know if I could have. Who knows what the future holds? I don't know, but I think, to be honest with you, I just felt like I would have been. I think I would have felt that I was doing I would have, I don't know, I just felt that it was immoral, really, in my opinion. I just didn't feel like I didn't think I could justify having children, really, for all sorts of different reasons. I see so many people on Facebook and, just in general, when you're out and about and you just see people with their own kids, and I just think to myself, I wonder what future they have. Anybody being born right now, it's like, what world are they going to grow up into? What's going to be left of the society, the culture that they are born into now, 20, 30 years down the line by the time they reach adulthood? It's like, what kind of a world are they going to inherit? Like everybody else, I've had my periods of very difficult, dark moments, dark times in life, like everyone, where you do think to yourself, it's like, why are we suffering? Or why are we going through this stuff? Like, why is there so much pain and heartache and misery and just suffering in this world, all the time, every day. And obviously, I find myself lucky compared to a lot of people. I've had a relatively, I'd say relatively okay-ish life in many respects, and I've never been homeless. I've never found myself in such a situation that, like, I was gonna starve, or I was gonna be in a really awkward, difficult situation where I would have to make some really, perhaps potentially, nasty decisions or some things. Like, so in that way, I find myself looking at, and obviously I've been fortunate enough to. I've always had somewhere to sleep. I've always had food in my stomach, and I've always had access to something to drink, and the very basics, and that's great and that's wonderful. But life's not. Surely life shouldn't just be about existence. I mean, from a kind of purely, protection kind of self-preservation angle, then yeah, of course, life is just about surviving, isn't it, really? It's just about feeding your brain, feeding your body what it needs, or at least some of what it needs some of the time, and keeping yourself, as healthy as you can, really, and obviously drinking enough and eating enough to stay alive. That's essentially what it boils down to. But, beyond that, as a human being, like most people, you do find yourself asking big, important questions. What really is a life well lived? What really is quality of life? Like, how do you define these things? Like, what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be fulfilled in this world? What does it mean to truly be content with yourself? Do we find those things in the suffering? Is that how we approach it? Is the suffering, is that the answer to these things? To suffer is to be happy. To suffer is to find wisdom. To suffer is to find spirituality or something. Is that what it is? I guess you could kind of take a kind of Buddhist kind of look at things and say, the path to enlightenment is through suffering, I guess. Maybe that is the case. Maybe that is, just a dark, cold reality of it. That without that stuff, life doesn't have any value to it. Life doesn't really have any purpose as far as our species is concerned. But certainly as far as those that are tend to be more on the introverted skills are concerned anyway. But I think it's pretty universal, I would say, and I think most people, regardless of your, mental makeup, ask at some point in their lives, at some stage, whether it's when somebody passes away or they're going through some varying degrees of trouble and stress and various forms of pressure, that we all at some point sit down or look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, like, what's this all about? Like, what am I doing here? And like, what am I meant to be doing with my life? It's like, surely this, and that big question, like, surely there must be more to life than this. There must be more than just purely just existing. Because while existing keeps you alive, it doesn't make you happy, does it? It's like you can have as much food as you want, you can have as much access to money as you want, you can have as much access to sex, to drugs, but to the things, the kind of trappings, if you like, these things that we're told are supposed to make us happy. And maybe it's just because we've just become ungrateful, because we've had such an abundance and everything's become oversaturated. Everything's to the extremes in today's world, that we don't live moderate, we don't live balanced lives anymore. We don't live these kind of, like when I was a kid, like if you wanted to, if you wanted to go somewhere or get something, you had to do things for it. You had to help your parents, you had to help your grandparents, clean the house, do the garden, whatever it was, like they'd expect something from you in return, and in return you'd get something for it. And now we see so many people that just have this sense of entitlement now. Especially on social media, that they just have some goddamn rights to feel like they have some special privileges, special rights over everybody else because of something or other. And I don't know, I just think that we've become a society of overindulgence. I think that's the problem, is we've become so overindulgent in almost every sense, every way, that we no longer have any gratitude. We no longer have any sense of balance in our lives. We don't have any. And I think the internet played into that. That is because everything's so easily accessible, so easy to get now. There's such an abundance of everything these days. If you want something, you can find, like 10 different websites with, you want a cup, you can, go on some online website and find like 50 different styles of it and different colours and whatever. It's like, it's chaos. It's utter madness, really. Look, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be options, and I'm not saying people shouldn't have the opportunities to make money and to have a business, but sometimes I just think that we've gone overboard with everything. I just think everything's gone too far. It's the same with social media. YouTube at one time was kind of, it felt a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of felt a bit more, it felt less chaotic. It felt more kind of friendly. It wasn't quite as in your face all the time. It wasn't bombarding you with things and telling you what to watch. And it was just, you went on YouTube and you saw what you saw, and like you didn't have the notifications thing, as far as I can remember anyway. Because obviously you didn't, most of the time you didn't, unless you had an account or whatever, like you didn't subscribe to channels, so you weren't getting bombarded. You weren't getting alerted all the time to their newest videos, their newest content. And now there's so many things over the last 10, 15 years that I've subscribed to on YouTube that you could literally spend a week going through all of the things that have, you know, when you wake up in the morning, you look at your notifications on YouTube or whatever, and or Facebook, and there's so many things you could watch, but you know you can't watch them all. So you end up, you know, having to prioritize certain things. And I just remember the time when it wasn't quite like that. You know, it's like YouTube was this kind of very primitive thing at one time. It wasn't this kind of, what would you call it? This sort of bottomless thing. It wasn't this like it wasn't this like universe-sized thing of just endless creators, endless channels. It was, you know, it was just like, it was quite minimal at one time. Now it's gone too far the other way. And I think that's really brought about a lot of problems, because yeah, it's nice that you have all those options and such a variety of different things now compared to where YouTube was you know, in its early primitive days. But at the same time, I think it's become very addictive. It's becoming more troublesome for younger people, I would say. So I can put YouTube down. It's not something I wouldn't say I was addicted to it, but I do like a lot of aspects of YouTube compared to other platforms. And as far as I know, there isn't a better alternative to YouTube out there, I don't think. And so they've got, you see, they create these monopolies, they create these platforms in which, you know, they try to, you know, get you in, grab your attention, keep you there, keep you coming back. And, you know, over time, you get more and more addicted to it. And as a result, you know, you keep coming back because you want that next dopamine hit. And I think that's, and I think also it gives us a lot of unrealistic expectations of the outside world and people, and, you know, because a lot of things that you see online aren't really entirely the reality. You know, Instagram is perhaps one of the best places for that. But I would say YouTube is becoming like that as well, and YouTube just feels very clogged up these days. It feels very, it's just heavily bombarded with not only the annoying, you know, 2 or 3 advertisements per video at the start of the video that you can't skip now, or, you know, the endless advertisements that bombard you throughout the video, and especially in like stuff with like white noise or ASMR. I just find it really irritating and disrespectful, which is kind of partly why I made my own stuff on my own channel, because I just felt that, well, I know now, I didn't quite know at the time when I was making some of the stuff, that I wouldn't be bombarded with as many advertisements because my channel's not monetized. So but yeah, I don't know, I just kind of think to myself, you know, what are we doing here? And I'm wasting hours and hours and hours of our time on, you know, as I sit here and make another video for my channel. But you know, you've got to do something as well, I suppose, haven't you? And that's the thing. It's, you know, how do you deal with the boredom of reality? And it can get very boring very quickly. You know, the thing is, I think what's happened is that we've gradually replaced the outside external world with digital, idealized, you know, comfortable projections of reality rather than actually what reality is. You know, now we like the internet because it's a safe space for the most part. There's a distant element to it, so we're not actually, you know, we don't have to deal with all of the difficulties of being there in the real world and dealing with all of those complicated dynamics between people, and the fact that it's, you know, you have the flexibility to switch upon different experiences if you get bored. And, you know, in the real world you can't do that. You often have to tolerate certain things for longer and tolerate certain people you don't want to.
And so there's that element to it as well. It's, you know, it's an easy form of escapism. But at the same time, I think I don't know. I think there are certainly a lot of great creators on YouTube. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of great people saying and doing a lot of great things, but there's also a lot of people on there that are just, I think, whether they realise it or not, kind of fueling a system that's not helping them and certainly not helping younger people, children and teenagers. So I don't know. I just think. Sometimes I just kind of wonder, you know, what would where would the world have gone if the internet hadn't have come into existence? You know, where would we be now as a society if social media hadn't took off? If the smartphone hadn't become so addictive and popular and so affordable for most people to buy? You know, would it have been better if our planet had never have developed life on it that could evolve to such an extent that it for all sorts of different events, and, you know, whether it's randomness or luck or whatever you want to call it, I don't know, but, you know, things that happened that eventually led to us, and you know, the rise of tool making and civilizations in society, culture, art, music, technology, technological society, technological civilization. Where would we be now? You know, where would we? What would our trajectory have been if those things hadn't have happened? And also, what is our trajectory now that those things have happened? You know, what would have happened if we would have stayed in the Stone Ages or the Bronze Age or the, you know, Roman Empire or something, whatever. I don't know, sometimes I just kind of think that it's a curse, really, life. Certainly us, anyway. It's a curse to be able to think and look deeply at the world around you and to ask big questions and to ponder on them and, you know, speculate and come up with your own theories, and, you know, and while it preoccupies the mind, it's a level of stress that sometimes you just don't need. You don't want, because you can't turn your mind off. You can't just switch it off. And it just becomes this just bombardment of ideas and thoughts and what ifs and buts, and I wonder what would have happened if I think it's just, you can just ruminate for so long as well over things. You just kind of get stuck in patterns and stuck being kind of obsessive over certain ideas and topics and themes and points and questions and definitions. You know, what does it, what is an existence? You know, what does it mean to just exist? You know, because you could argue that existing would just be present without having to do anything, wouldn't it? Just to exist. Because essentially all we really do is tend to the needs of our body all the time. You know, our body tells us that we need to eat, we need to drink, we need to go to the toilet, you know, we need to exercise, we need to do less of this, more of this. And psychologically, you know, that's kind of a similar thing. You know, we have to take care of this aspect of our mind and try and prevent this part of our minds from dominating over others. And You know, don't get too anxious, don't get too obsessed, don't get too paranoid over certain things. You know, have self-control and, you know, and be reserved, and I don't know. I just find life to be really exhausting because there's so many things going on. I don't know. I just find it all really tiring. And you know, there are times where you just think to yourself, like, I really wish I hadn't been born. I wish I hadn't been brought into this world. Not because life's crap necessarily. It's just that it's just so exhausting all the time. You know, having just this endless, like, just endless chores and responsibilities and duties and loyalties, and trying to navigate all of the complexities of the people around you all the time, and dealing with the problems of your body, whether it's ill health or you're going through some mental health problems, it's, you know, pains, aches. It just all gets really tiring. You know, I used to kind of think to myself, oh, I wonder why, like, you know, those in their sort of like 40s, 50s, 60s or whatever seem kind of more miserable than those that are younger. And I said, I get it now, I get it. Because it's exhausting, and the older you get, the less energy you have to want, and the less desire you have really to want to keep living like that. And no wonder by the time you reach your 70s and 80s, you're fucking exhausted, you're knackered, you're finished, it's over. You know, because it is. Because your body's gone, you know, your brain's gone. It's just like, you're just a cabbage, you know, you're just a washed up jacket potato, you know, you're just a smashed up cabbage. You just finished. It's over. Your body just can't take it anymore. Your brain's just like, I just don't want to be here anymore. And that's sometimes how I feel about my life, myself, the world at times. Not always, but there are times where you just think to yourself, you know, I just wish that I would just die already. You know, I wish I'd just get hit by a car today. I wish that I just end up having a fucking horrific, freakish accident. And just fucking let me go already, you know? Just let me fucking get out of this madhouse that I found myself in, that I now have to somehow work around. And I think that's what it is that I just don't feel that the world is somewhere that I, one, can relate to anymore, two, feel like I really connect with in any way, and three, I'm just getting more and more tired with as I get older. You know, what is my purpose in life at this point? You know, when you're young, it's like, it's an open kind of like, you know, it's like you've got that you go through that phase where like anything's open to you. It's like the world's your oyster, as they say, you know, the world's yours to take, and you know, it's you've got all that optimism and sort of, you know, that naivety and ignorance about life, and that drives you forward, that pushes you on, because you haven't realised the things that quell those things over time. As you get older, you realise that, you know, like, you start to go through this very slow, gradual transition from naivety to realism. You go through this period of, oh, actually, I was being very foolish and silly and naive, and hopefully I'm not anymore. And so I don't know. Sometimes I just kind of think to myself, you know, life would just be better if it wasn't here. You know? And sometimes I kind of think to myself, I hope there isn't other civil. I sometimes just wonder about, the possibility of life out there in the galaxy or beyond, whether it's nearby galaxies or parts of the universe, whatever. What does that mean for us if that is the case? If it is out there or it isn't out there, what are the implications of that for us potentially? Certainly, if there is or isn't any life out there in the galaxy like us, I suspect probably that there's some kind of life, complex life. Probably some planets out there with ecosystems and certainly ocean life and various forms of life. I'm sure probably not too dissimilar to our own, I would imagine, even if there are only a handful. I'm pretty sure there's life out there in the galaxy. I think that's kind of a reasonable assumption, expectation, really. But as for civilizations, certainly technological civilizations is another matter entirely. It's possible, I suppose, that there might be other species out there that look a bit similar to us, that maybe have had somewhat of a similar path to us in some ways. But as for whether they go on then to develop technology, is just one of those big question marks. Nobody knows the answer to that yet. But it looks, from what I've been reading recently, it's certainly looking more likely that there's going to be some kind of life on some of the moons in our solar systems, even on one of the moons of Uranus apparently as well. I just read yesterday, so that's quite interesting. But I think I guess my hope is that in some ways that if there is any life out there, it's nothing like us. I think it would be. But then again, who's to say how things would end up developing on a different world? Maybe some planets end up in a more kind of morally bound system of living, a more kind of ethically bound system of living over thousands of years. I don't know, but surely not every species, if there is anything out there like us, would end up exactly where we are. I doubt it. I mean, even if they do go on to develop their own forms of civilization and technology, they won't be exactly the same, I don't think. But again, it's one of those big questions. Nobody has an answer to that. Nobody even knows if there's even life on one of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn yet. Let alone other parts of our solar system, or out there in nearby star systems like Alpha Centauri, or perhaps in some of these Kepler exoplanets or the TRAPPIST system. Nobody knows. We're barely we're basically using extremely primitive technology, even when it comes to looking for things like biosignatures. So it's going to take a few decades yet, I think, before we have any information back from Mars missions and Europa and Enceladus and wherever else, maybe Titan, Io or whatever. So we'll see what happens there. But in some ways, I hope that most life in the galaxy is kind of simple, primitive, or I just hope that whatever it is, if there is anything advanced, complex out there, which is possible, plausible even, I guess, probable even, given the vastness of the galactical habitable zone, and I'd say there's at least probably a few handful of planets that could possibly have developed something more than just simple, very primitive, simple life. There's a very good chance that there's something else out there, I reckon, in the galaxy somewhere. And if not, probably in the Andromeda galaxy, given its massive, extremely massive size compared to our own galaxy. So I think there's a good chance that life exists out there, I would say, even if it's sparse and densely populated and rare. Separated by vast distances. I reckon it's probably out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if across the entire universe there's at least another handful of civilizations, maybe even a few thousand of them, given that there's at least 2 trillion galaxies out there. As far as we know, there might be much more than that. But sometimes I kind of just think, is it better if we don't find something? Would it be better if there isn't anything else out there like us? It's one thing for there to be simple, very simple forms of life, fungi and bacteria and very, very primitive forms of life or whatever. But that's one thing. But then when we're talking about more complex, advanced, intelligent species, whether they develop technology or not, I don't, that's a whole other thing. But certainly, maybe it's not so much about whether intelligent, advanced, complex life exists. It's just about more of the fact of, should we hope that they aren't common in terms of the possibility of technological advancements? I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I just think to myself, maybe it was an accident. Maybe maybe nature's where maybe there's a reason why we're alone. If we just for argument's sake say that we are alone in the entire universe, which I highly doubt that is the case. But if we are, just for the sake of it, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's meant to be like that. Maybe something like us shouldn't have ever happened. Should never have come into. And maybe that it possibly could be 1 in 2 trillion chance of us coming into existence. That's probably a bit of a stretch, but who knows? It could be. If there's one species like us per galaxy, just say on average, then then obviously that we're talking about potential astronomical civilizations and technologically capable species out, which I doubt it's. I doubt it's probably right. Who knows? Who really truly knows what the truth is? But my guess probably is that whatever the case may be, it will be highly complex. There'll be variations. There probably will be some planets similar to us in some ways, not exact copies, but there'll be a scale, won't there? There'll be a spectrum. There'll be variations, and some will be just about right, more or less, give or take. Some will be catastrophe. Just some planets will just have never ever gotten going as far as life's concerned. Some moons will probably have life on them, I would imagine. So, I think that the question of whether life exists out there, not that this video is about that, I've already made a video about this topic before, but, to me, it's more of a case of, what does that mean for us if life is out there in terms of life like us or similar to us? What does that mean for us as a species? And what does that mean for our future? Because if we do somehow in the next couple of decades or centuries find biosignatures or even better find tech signatures on some distant world, whether those civilizations still exist or not, depending on how far away they are, in light years that is, what does that mean? What's like, and how would we initiate that contact? How would we I don't know. Sometimes I just think I hope we never find anything. That's kind of my gut feeling sometimes with this whole thing. It's like I think, well, certainly in my lifetime, I don't think we're going to find any civilizations because it's just the galaxy is just too vast, and the technology is just too simple. It's not powerful enough yet. Maybe when the next line of telescopes come into action in the 2030s, 40s and beyond, maybe we'll start to find some pretty convincing biosignatures. Probably by the time I'm in my 50s or 60s, or by the time I'm an old man, if I reach that age, in my 70s, 80s, 90s, let's say, I think we will eventually find some pretty compelling evidence for biosignatures, I reckon. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do find some kind of life in our own backyard. Probably on Europa, I reckon, within the next 10 to 20 years, and certainly some more interesting evidence of former life. I don't know if there's anything on life, any kind of life on Mars now underneath the Martian surface, but I guess it's possible. But my gut instinct says it's probably unlikely. It's probably just fossils if there's anything there at all. But as for the moons on the gas giants, I think there's a lot higher chance of the life being out there. But again, what does that even mean? Even if that is the case, what does it mean? How does that affect us? What does it mean for the how does that then play into the question of are we alone in the universe or are we in the galaxy or not? Because even if we do find life in our solar system, you've got to ask yourself, well, how often do solar systems like ours pop into existence, and stay as they are, because it's such a complicated matter with regards to orbits and gravity and specific star types and certain types of planets, and the relationships between them and everything. A certain type of moon, although some planets might have kind of sort of mitigated naturally through maybe from 2 moons, or I don't know, it's hard to say. I'm sure there'll be all sorts of variations of planets where some will have developed life probably through some other ways or means, whether it's through difficult compounds, chemical, biological method, different ways in which life can get going and can stay stable and evolve over time. I don't think Earth is necessarily probably the only place that has it. I don't think that life on Earth is necessarily the one-size-fits-all kind of thing to life necessarily. There might be other ways that life can evolve and go through evolutionary mechanisms. I'm sure that certain things like adaptations and survival of the fittest and things are probably kind of similar to some extent, but the chemical compositions and biological mechanisms might sort of differ slightly in some ways. There may be other ways in which things can happen, but regardless, that it doesn't matter whether other life is out there in terms of, whether it's plants, animals, birds, marine life, whatever it is, insects. That's kind of, it's like, I think let's hope that that's all there is out there. If there's even any of that, it could be that it's shockingly rare, to the point where it's basically just us and, another couple of planets you can literally count one hand maybe. Who knows? It might be more than that. Could be a few hundreds. I don't know. But sometimes I do kind of ponder on, is it better if it, let's just for argument's sake say that something like us is extremely rare to the point where it's almost impossible. It can happen because we're proof of it, but it's rare to the point of it being practically non-existent for the most part. What does that mean to us? If we ever found concrete proof of the question of are we alone, what does that mean to us as a species? Certainly, if that is the case, then what is the future for our planet? What is the future? What happens to our species? What happens to there's a couple of billion people on the planet, over time. I mean, how are we gonna not that I particularly care, because it's like I'm not going to be here, am I? But let's say, just for argument's sake, that humanity survives on Earth for a couple more centuries with various new technologies and some more kind of stable, sustainable energy sources, let's say, and better recycling methods and new materials being developed, or whatever the case may be, right? Even with all of that, even at the most extreme levels of innovation and moderation of resources and technological kind of sustainability, what you want to call it, energy sources and more sustainable living and consumerism and etc., agriculture and all that kind of stuff. Even with all of that, I would say we're probably going to, at the very most, we might get, say, 300 to 300 to 500 years possibly out of it, but it might not even be that, because with the rates that we're using our natural resources on this planet is such that, we'll be lucky if there's anything left for future generations within a century from now. We're already, practically at the point where we're basically, there's a reason why there's such a push towards green energy, because oil reserves, are getting more and more difficult to access, and it's just, there's only so much. I think there's something like 50 to 70 years potentially of oil production left. So it's obvious that we there's no doubt about it, that we have to move away from oil, over a reliance on oil and other natural resources. And don't forget, there's only so much iron ore you can extract from the ground, and coal and etc. There's only so much left. So at some point, we are going to have to start mining the moon, other moons in the solar system, even potentially for planets somehow, whether that's for various gases or water, whatever. At some point, we are going to have to try and become the masters of our own solar system in terms of mining techniques and establishing bases and facilities on these places. It's going to have to happen, because otherwise our species just won't survive. There's no doubt about it. But then at some point, how far do you go? How far can you realistically go with that? Given it's extremely dangerous, extremely costly, extremely energy intensive and resource intensive. So how far can you go with that? Realistically, I don't know. Maybe a couple of centuries, maybe. So I would say certainly within 1,000 years, we're going to have to leave our solar system, I reckon. There's just no way we can survive otherwise. There's just not. And don't forget all of the implications of gradual increases in climate instability. That's going to cause all sorts of chaos and catastrophe. So it's, we know the planets, we're living on borrowed time here on this planet as a species for all sorts of reasons. So at some point we're going to have to leave our solar system. But how do we do that? How is that going to happen? It's all going to terraforming Mars or moving to another part of our solar system. But again, there's only going to be so many resources you can use, and certain things just won't be feasible. So at some point we're going to be looking for another planet, whether that's Alpha Centauri, whether that's another star system somewhere relatively close by, within a few light years, I don't know. But if we think we're going to be traversing across the galaxy anytime soon, then it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because, and maybe it shouldn't happen. Going back to this whole idea of antinatalism and everything. Maybe in the end it's better if maybe there is a point where you just, technologically speaking, you just can't get beyond it. Like maybe there is actually a limit to energy use, and maybe that's why if it is the case that technological civilizations are rare, or they kind of self-implode at a certain point, maybe that might be it. Maybe that's the reason why, because there's just a point where you just can't get beyond it. It's just, no matter what you do, it's just impossible to move beyond it. I don't know whether that's the reality of it, but it could be. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe that's that's partly why, possibly, why we've been able to survive so long, because we haven't been, as far as we know anyway, struck by some civilization nearby that came to looking for more resources and whatever, to try and dominate our planet. Food sources, earth metals, natural resources. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just because of distance, time, the fact that things are so far spread out that even if a civilization were close enough to us, we probably wouldn't detect it. So I don't know. I mean, not that, as I said, this video is not about cosmology or the big question of life out there, but I think it's one of those things that at least anyone that's got any brains, it's not at least anyone that's curious, at least you must have thought of at least once. When you look up at the moon at night, when you look out there and you see this, the distant stars, or rather, the light that's took so long to reach the point where we can actually see it. It's just one of those things that you're just naturally curious about. I wonder what's out there. Wonder what might be out there. Is it just us? Is that a good thing? Is it better for it only to be us, or is it actually better if there are other things out there like us? Sometimes I just think to myself, sometimes I think maybe it's better if we are alone. Look what we've done as a species during our course of our history. Look at the suffering. Look at the immense misery that we've brought on ourselves and our planet as well. The amount of damage we've caused to it. The amount of, and I mean in recent history. Is it better to never develop technology? Is it better to not be intelligent? Is happiness? Is it possible that happiness actually is only something you can achieve without it? I don't know. Some might say, well, without intelligence, you can't create cures and medicines and things like. But some people might say, it's like it's without you've got a more clearer head. It's like you're not bogged down with so many things. Because with intelligence often means that you're naturally creative, you're naturally curious about life in the world, and you just want to think. Is it better to suffer? Is it better not to suffer? I guess it depends on what you get out of that suffering, doesn't it? Some people say you can't. What do they say? No pain, no gain. But surely. But why? Why the pain though? Like surely, if it's beneficial for the body to be fit and healthy, then surely wouldn't it have been better for the body to have developed defense mechanisms in which you don't feel that pain, so therefore it's easier to actually go through the struggles. But then again, you could say, well, what does it mean to be a human being then? If you don't feel anything, there's no sense of challenge in this world. There's no sense of needing to be resilient and to push yourself through mental, emotional, psychological pain. And what does it mean to be alive? What is being alive? Is it just your heart beating? Is it just your brain firing away? What does it mean? What is life? What do we mean by life? What is it to live? What is it to exist? Now, of course, you could probably answer some of these things with, sort of biologically based and evolutionary based answers, I guess. But from a philosophical point of view, these are very difficult things to answer. And I don't think there is really any really convincing answer to these things. You could say, well, we're just here to procreate and create offspring so that our species continues. It's like, yeah, but why though? Like, why? what's the point of that? Like why do you have to do that? Why do you feel the need to do that? Is it because you're scared of your own mortality? And so by bringing children into the world, it makes you feel better about it. It makes you, it takes that pain, that loneliness, that inevitability out of your mind. You know, at the end of the day, this world is indifferent to us. It doesn't care. You know, the universe is just, it's not malicious, but it's not empathy driven either. It's just this entity of physics, you know, of chemistry, of biology that is just playing itself out. It's just like someone like throwing a bunch of coins on the table and just letting it just see what happens, you know, or a bunch of dice on the table and just seeing whatever naturally happens. It's just this. I don't know. It's like nature's expression. It's just like, there you go, do whatever you want. I don't really care. You know, it's almost like a kind of, you know, carefree parent or whatever with a bunch of the children on the holiday. You know, go and do whatever you want. You know, it's indifferent. It doesn't. You know, it doesn't matter whether life exists or not to the universes. You know, if the universe had any concept or has any concept of a conscience or consciousness, you know, does it matter whether life exists or not to it? Probably not. No. It just sets the stage for the possibility of life to happen. That's all. It's not this necessarily this destined thing for life to happen. It's just that life is just one possible outcome. You know, it's like, and a lot of the times it doesn't work. It doesn't work out, or it works temporarily. But the universe doesn't care. It's just a fabric, isn't it? It's just whether it's quantum fluctuations, or, you know, whether you want to take the string theory aspect, or whether you want to look at the multiverse theory, whether you want to look at the, you know, the aspects of dark energy and gravity and physics. So, well, however you want to look at the universe, think about the universe, or whatever's really behind it, and whatever reality might be, whether it's different levels of physics, you know, different evolutions of physics and chemistry and biology, whatever, whether it's different realms, perhaps. I mean, I don't know. You know, maybe the universe is much more simpler than we think, or maybe it's much more unimaginably more complicated than we will ever be able to truly understand it. I don't know. But whatever the case, you know, it's just, we are just one planet among, you know, we are just probably I would imagine. My guess is it's probably just a kind of average solar system, probably for the most part. You know, it's kind of average sun, you know, some average planets on it, and we just happen to be the planet that we evolved on, and, you know, life got going here, even though in probably many ways it should never have happened because of all sorts of setbacks and all sorts of things that set in motion life to happen here, and then for it to evolve and become complex life and more advanced life and intelligent and creative and curious, and the ability to put things, you know, ideas together, and to create knowledge and science and maths and understanding of the laws of nature, of the laws of the universe itself. I mean, it's all pretty incredible. There's no doubt about that. It's definitely fascinating stuff. But who's to say that is the common out? You know, either F is an outlier or it's not. You know, we don't know. And, you know, sometimes I kind of obsess over the cosmology kind of stuff because it kind of bothers me. Because I suppose, like a lot of people, you want, in the back of your mind, you kind of want there to be some kind of life out there, but sometimes you think to yourself, you know, well, is that actually potentially a really negative thing for us? And if life is out there, then that just shows you that we're not particularly special, especially if it's more complex life. And I believe that probably, if anything, the Earth is probably just a kind of relatively kind of just lucky, average, rocky world, you know, with oceans on it. That's all. It's nothing particularly special. It might even not even be the best kind of planet for life, you know. So, you know, we just don't know, and we get so obsessed with this idea of, you know, Earth being this extremely precious place and special place because we haven't found anything yet. Well, but we're talking about a galaxy that's 100,000 light years across, 1,000 light years deep, or in depth, and you know, we're talking about potentially billions of stars, you know, hundreds of billions of stars, and at least probably a couple of million or maybe a billion or so of potentially, I suppose, habitable planets, you know, and at least a very small handful of those will have life, probably will have some kind of life on it that will resemble something similar to Earth, I would imagine. So I just don't think that's that unique or special. I think as far as our species is concerned, then maybe we might be extremely rare, possibly. But again, we just don't know. You know, we don't know whether there are solar systems out there, planets out there that are actually much better suited for life, for complex life to get a foothold quicker than what happened on Earth. You know, we just don't know. You know, and is it really just a case of that we need these answers to make ourselves feel better about our one planet in this, what sometimes feels like a very, just a void of nothing, you know, just an emptiness, a loneliness, like literally just a kind of just endless mass of just an endless space with nothing in it. I mean, you know, it's like it's one of those things that we seem so desperate to need an answer for. We're so desperate for there to be life out there, but you know, maybe in the end, you know, the answer is already there, and that our solar system is kind of a bit of a proof of that. The fact that only one planet ended up with complex life on it, and only one species on that same planet ended up as us. You know, ended up with, you know, thousands of years of development, evolution, and vast amounts of intellectual knowledge and ideas and creativity and culture and societies and technology. But maybe the reason we're so desperate for an answer is because deep down maybe we kind of know what the answer is, and we need to keep telling ourselves that life's out there. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's there is nothing out there. You know, maybe it's that, you know, if you perhaps take the model of a kind of the multiverse kind of thing, or the idea that there might be other universes out there, either stuck together or in some way or kind of separated somehow, then, you know, maybe there are universes out there that have more life in them than ours. You know, maybe ours is just an extreme fluke, or maybe, you know, there's some that have more life in them than ours do. I don't know. Whatever the case, we certainly seem to be we seem to need to have this answer. We need to know. We need to put an end to this existential question. And I think at the back of our minds, we all know that we're living in a way that's almost absurd, you know, compared to previous generations, certainly compared to the way that our, you know, ancestors lived and early ancestors lived. And so we live in a world in a world so far removed from early hominids that it's unbelievable. And, you know, we project our life, our normality, as it were, onto the rest of the universe, as if it's this matter-of-factly thing, or there must be life out there, there must, and I catch myself doing the same thing, there must be life out there. There's got to be somewhere, and my guess is probably that there is life out there. But the problem is we see it so much as though it must be like Earth, it has to be like Earth. Whatever life out, if there's anything out there like us, it has to be exactly like us. It has to have the same technology, the same civilization, and I just don't think that will be the case. I think it will be if there are other planets out there with technologies and civilizations, which I don't think is out of the question, there won't be exact copies of us. There's just no. The thing is, it's a big ask anyway to expect. It's a big ask anyway to expect there to be technological life out there for all sorts of reasons, but then to expect that it's going to be exactly like us. We're talking about the potential of an exact copy of our planet, of our species, of our evolutionary path, and everything that happened to Earth. That might be one in so many, like, don't they call it goggleplex years, I think it's called. It could be one in so many trillion chance, I don't know. But whatever the case may be, I think it's hardly unlikely that there will be an exact copy of us. There certainly won't be another human species exactly like us. I don't think that's. I think that's probably a bit of a far-fetched expectation, in my opinion. And even if they do exist out there, so what? So what if they do exist? We've got technology in our own planet. We've got our own civilization. And, we've got resources to last us probably at least a century on our own planet, and certainly a few centuries within our solar system. So even if they are out there, even if they're relatively kind of close to us, then so what? What does it matter? Even if we could see them now, even if we could communicate with them. We'll take at least a few, even if they're just a couple of light years away, we're still talking about a few years to send messages between us. And, good luck getting to them. The fact that we, this thing of like, this idea of that, well, nothing's visited, therefore nothing exists. Well, if there are other civilizations out there in the galaxy, well, we haven't visited them yet. So, you have to think about that angle of it as well, like, maybe it's because they've had setbacks, or they're at a similar kind of technological rate as we are. Maybe they're self-destructed. Maybe they had wars, climate problems. I don't know. Issue from the sun. I don't know. We just don't know. The answer to the question of are we alone is we do not know. But my point, I guess, in this video is like, does it matter? Does it really matter? In the end, whatever the answer is, does it affect us? Is it going to affect the average person on this planet? I doubt it. People might be curious. It would certainly be a fascinating thing to wake up to in the news that we found evidence of life on another world. Don't get me wrong, that would be very, very interesting to read, because that proves that we're not the only life. But, in any real meaningful way, does it really matter? Does it change the way that we're going to live our lives? Probably not. Was it going to change the direction of humanity? Probably. But not for the average person. Not anytime soon, no. I wouldn't worry about it. It doesn't really matter if life's out there or not. And even if it is, it's probably the stuff we're going to come across I reckon anyway, over the coming decades, is not going to be anything spectacularly interesting. We might find some basic stuff in our solar system. Whoopee-doo, big deal. Okay, great. Well, now what? And so we're going to be spending decades trying to find biosignatures and confirming them, and looking for tech signatures, and we may not find anything. We might not find anything of any real value out there. Or maybe we do. But at the end of the day, is that gonna make you change the way you live your life, to make you are you going to become a cosmologist, or astrophysicist, or whatever? I doubt, probably not. You might get more interested, curious about space. Sure, I mean, of course it will be fascinating to read about another life, another form of life somewhere that got going, and because that would then, it would fill that area in ourselves that would say, okay, right, we're not alone. But even if we do find life out there, it doesn't mean it's common. It could take us decades to find one planet that's got life on it, and then it might be extremely disappointing, whatever that life is. So we just don't know. I think we have too many high expectations. I mean, I'm not saying that we should be pessimistic, but I just think that we should be realistic about, our just kind of quash our expectations a little bit, at least just kind of keep an open mind about the whole thing. And in any case, what does it matter? It's like, and even if life's out there, we're not going to be meeting. If there is anything like us out there, we're not going to be visiting anytime soon. They're not going to be hearing from us anytime soon. And even if we had the capabilities to do so, it might be the worst thing that we ever did. Maybe at some point some civilization will come across our remains of what was our civilization, our technology at some point. Maybe we will come across their artifacts, in the long distant future. Maybe civilizations, more life will come into existence later on down the line. Oh, who knows? Maybe most of it's already happened. I don't know. Maybe I just think in the end, sometimes it's better if it's just us. If it's just us, some simple life, some complex life, and that's as far as it goes. Maybe possibly there's the odd bit of intelligent life here and there scattered across the universe, possibly. But again, as to how likely that is, I don't know. But certainly, for the time being, certainly for the foreseeable future on our planet, we've got more pressing things to worry about than to, in my opinion anyway, than looking out there into the stars. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. It's certainly one of those things that we're all curious about, and I think we would all like an answer to. But for the time being, we've got all sorts of problems on our own planet. Political instability, climate issues, the constant threat of war, nuclear war. Various inequalities being driven by economic instability, the potential problems of AI, censorship, more authoritarianism, more existential issues because of technological innovation and advancements, and in areas where people rely on people in difficult circumstances rely on for a bit of money. Even in the Western world, the fact that money doesn't stretch as much as it used to, the fact that there's more of a threat of diseases now than in some ways than there used to be, certainly when it comes to things like the threat of pandemics, dwindling resources. I don't know, sometimes I just think it's better if we never happened. It would have been better if we never came into existence. If we had never had evolved. Don't get me wrong. I like waking up every day and being alive. I like hearing the birds and spending time with my dogs and seeing the sunshine and the rain, and I like being alive. But sometimes I just think, is it really worth it in the end? What would it have been better if nothing of or even the universe itself, if the universe never had happened, if that's even a possibility? I mean, I don't know if whether it's actually possible for nothing to exist, or whether it's possible that universe is kind of popping pop in and out of existence every so many goggleplex, you know, eons. I don't know, whatever. You know, this is just such big questions, such big open things that the mind boggles when you think about these kind of things. But I don't know. Sometimes I just get the impression that kind of life's just a bit over kind of. It's oversold. It's a bit kind of. You know, the things that you're told that are supposed to make you happy often don't make you happy. You know, getting married, having kids, getting that stable job, getting that new car, getting a new phone, you know, getting some new clothes. You know, these are all temporary, materialistic, or, you know, societally driven things that we're expected to believe in. You know, we're expected to believe that these are the cures of, for all of the existential issues that we go through as adults. You know, all of the problems that they are somehow the medicine to all of the suffering and pondering on what it's all about. You know, and for me, I don't want kids. You know, I don't even know at this point if I even want to be in relationships anymore. You know, sometimes I question whether I even want to speak to my parents anymore, in all honesty. You know, sometimes I think I just don't want to leave the house. I don't want to go outside. Not because I can't face it, but I prefer being inside. I prefer my own space, my own company. And just the fact that there's so many issues you've got to deal with people, you know, the constant ego bashing of people and the constant insecurities being played out wherever you go all the time, and just the way that people speak, the kind of tone that people use, their body language, their sarcasm, their wit, their passive aggressiveness, you know, their need to be seen as confident and educated and cool and hip and edgy and, you know, unique and special and all this shit, and just the constant bombardment of people is kind of sometimes, and their problems is what makes me think. I just wish our species never got off the ground. Really, I really do. As much as I like being a human being, and having the world that I have around me and the world that I grew up in, and I'm grateful for it in many ways, but you know. Can I honestly say that it was worth it in the end? I don't know, because I haven't got any frame of reference, have I? I haven't got anything to compare it to. So, and just this endless thing of like people like parading their fucking kids on social media, and just this endless thing of like, oh, look at me, look at my life. Look how wonderful my life is. Look how great everything is. Look what I'm doing. Look where I am. Look what I'm wearing. Look what I just bought. Buy into this. Buy into that. My kids are great. My kids are wonderful. They are the future. Blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not saying that life doesn't have some good elements to it at times, briefly. Yes, it does. Life is, in some ways, at times, a joyous thing. At times, but the very fleeting, very brief moments. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the rest of the time. But it's because of the rest of the time that those moments are more amplified. You know, it's but that's my point. Is that you have to go through all that other crap to get those this tiny little gems, those tiny little, just tidgy little bits of like moments of joy and happiness. And a lot of the time, often it's just, they're not even always necessarily happy. It's not even always happiness. It's just this brief respite from it, isn't it? It's this brief, you know, like I said the other day, I'm talking about holidays and stuff. It's just this momentary escapism from it. So is it really happiness? I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you know, if that's the best you can hope for in this world, then again, you know, is it worth it? Is life really worth it in the end? You know, it's all good. It's all good and well to be resilient and motivated and to be happy and positive and optimistic. But you know, at the end of the day, you can only really be those things, I think, if you've had. Yeah, you can't have one without the other. It's like it's a yin and yang type thing, isn't it? It's a, you know, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's basically what life is, isn't it? Well, certainly if you look at the angle of what I'm talking about here, is, you know, without suffering you can't really have quote unquote happiness. You know, what is really the point of existence in general, just in overall, you know, from a philosophical angle, you know, what is the point of it? Why have anything at all? Why have any physics? Why have any chemistry? Why have any biology? Why have any laws of the cosmos, the fabric of the cosmos? Why have anything at all? Why is it there? What is the point of anything, really? What is the point of it all? You know, I mean, if life is extremely, extremely rare, then why have a universe to begin with? Like, what? I mean, is it just? That's something I've never been able to kind of wrap my head around. Is like, what, is it? Yeah, you can talk about how and the processes and, you know, the science behind it, but what's the point of it? Like, what's it doing? Like, what's it? And you could say, well, it's just doing what it's doing. It just is what it is. But surely there must be some kind of, like, you know, a sort of path towards something. And sure, you know, that doesn't nature prove that it has this need for structure and forms and, you know, laws of physics and stuff. So that tells me that there's some kind of a need for structure. But why though? Why is there this need for galaxies and planets and moons and black holes and stars and everything? What is it? What is it all about? You know, what is all of this stuff? What does it really mean? I mean, is it just that it's just purely just random? It just does whatever the fuck it wants, and just every now and again certain things line up in unbelievable ways that life happens? I mean, is that all it is? And everything else is just a cold void darkness of nothingness going on, apart from, you know, activity from stars or, you know, suns, moons, planets, interactions, and, you know, asteroids, comets, blah blah blah, and you know, very kind of basic stuff from our perspective. You know, I don't know. I just sometimes feel that it would be better. It would be fairer. Would be a more moral thing if life didn't exist. I think that's kind of the way I see it sometimes. That it's almost immoral for life to exist. It's almost unethical for it to happen, because, you know, there's no real sense of true liberation or freedom in this life, in this world. You know, you're bound by the laws of nature, really, competition, you know, for resources, for mating, for dominance, for control and power. You know, you're bound by the laws of nature, you know, that your body's extremely vulnerable to disease and illness and cancer and, you know, disorders of one kind or another. The fact that your body's bound by, you know, on average, let's say about 70 to 80 years of life, it's like there's no escape from it. You can't escape your body, you can't escape your mind, unless you know, take certain substances. But even then, it's still kind of essentially just escapism, isn't it? But that's about the closest thing you can get to it. So I understand why people feel drawn to that. I get it. But I think on all of this is this need for some kind of something to hold on to, is the sense of some kind of spiritual grounding, some spiritual foundations, and you know, I think for me, I've just never really truly felt like I found that. I've always felt like I was wandering, trying to look for something that in the back of my mind I wasn't even sure if it existed. And sometimes I felt there was nothing there. It was just a cold, harsh, brutal world of nothingness. You know, no answers, no real answers, no real true sense of morality or ethics or justice, fairness, true decency. And the more I live, the more I kind of sense that I don't know what, maybe a bit of an oversimplification, but sometimes I feel that, you know, that's what this world is. That's what our species is. It's just one form of coping to another. If it's not philosophy, it's religion. If it's not religion, it's culture. You know, it's some aspects of our culture, or a need to feel connected with our society, and this need to be drawn towards music and art and communities, and some sense that we're liberated and, you know, free in some way. Because essentially, you know, you get thrust into this world whether you like it or not. You know, that's all it is. You find yourself being conscious of the fact that you're conscious and alive at a certain age. Usually around about, say, about 3 or 4. You know, you develop things as you go along. You learn things through, you know, communication and, you know, interactions with others, and you develop certain interests and things as you go along. And you pick up things, and you make mistakes, and you learn, and you have bad experiences which propel you forwards or back sometimes. And, you know, you go through all of the trauma of puberty, and, you know, the difficulties of adolescent years. And then you go through your difficulties in your 20s, your identity, what you think is your identity formation, trying things out, exploring, you know, trial and error. And that's essentially your entire life, really. Like, there's a certain point where I think, apart from maybe a certain number of years in your midlife period, I would say, that's basically who you are. That's you know, yeah, you do change as you get older, but a lot of that's kind of forced upon you anyway. You know, it's like I know at my age there are certain things I can't do that I could do 10 years ago. There are certain things that would make me look really cringy compared to, you know, if I did it when I was in my 20s. So, you know, you're bound by all sorts of limitations of your own culture and society, and like the expectations of other people based on your age, and like how you look and how you sound and how you behave. And so I don't know, I just find that there's so many things of this world that I find extremely limiting, restrictive, and there's this sense of I really want to find something that liberates me. And I haven't found it. I didn't find it through religion. I certainly haven't found it through philosophy. I haven't found it through my YouTube channel. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you get moments where you kind of feel happy with something that you said or you did, but it's not liberation. It's not really freedom. It's not really the sense that you're propelling yourself into some higher dimension or whatever it is. You know, that's why I think why so many people get drawn towards psychedelics or psychoactive substances, because it's the closest possible thing you can get to that, unless you're like really extremely into meditation or I don't know, like really extreme things like maybe like the euphoria after like an ice bath, or like doing adrenaline based like events, whatever. So and I think that's essentially what we're doing. And we all go looking for something like that. We'd go looking for the closest possible thing to liberation that we can find. Some people find it in drugs and alcohol. Some people find it in becoming, you know, extremely religious, Buddhism, philosophy, art, one form of art or another, writing, you know, photography, you know, even to maybe in some ways kind of pornography and sort of you know, obsession over sex and women and all that kind of crap. Gaming, you know, because essentially, you know, you live your life, you live your life being thrown into the deep end of a pool, and you're expected to then, you better quickly figure out how to not only survive but make the most of that experience. That's essentially what it is for the rest of your life, until you basically can no longer have the abilities to swim, and that's it. You're finished. As an analogy, that's it. It's and you don't have a choice in that. It's like you get brought into this world, and you are then forced to confront. You're just forced to confront it, and you're forced to, because you're not told how to navigate it. You naturally feel drawn to, through your instincts and your experiences, you feel naturally drawn towards different things. That's why some people turn to mythology and symbolism and religious hope and a need to be part of a certain community, to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of loyalty, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in life. But I think really, in my view, that while, without all of the suffering, we would never have ended up with such great architecture and music and art. There's so many different aspects of philosophy and scientific knowledge as well. Sometimes I just think to myself, if that's what it takes, if that's the life that you have to have, that's the reality of what you have to have to reach those ends, it's like, well, who does it really benefit? Because even with all of those things, even when you've achieved, just as well as I do, the thrill is often in the journey rather than the end product of something. And so often we spend our lives constantly addicted to something, being obsessed with something, because it's given us this sense of prioritizing our thoughts and compartmentalizing things. But all we're doing really is just delaying what's there. We're just trying to pretend that there aren't certain things going on in our heads or in our lives. And so instead of confronting those things, we live in denial. So we spend time online, watching pornography, gaming, and chasing that woman or that man that you so desperately think you need. Creating something just to give you some sense of self-importance and sort of grandiose ideas of your own, your own place in the world, and just how you matter. But at the end, nature, evolution, it doesn't give a shit about what you feel, what you think, what you're doing, what you're not doing. It doesn't care. It's your brain only cares, and the fact that you perceive that you don't care is why you don't care. It's your perception of things. It's what you think you're thinking about, what you think you're feeling about, is sometimes often more of a problem than the actual things that those feelings and thoughts are connected to. Because you dwell on things, you ruminate, you get obsessed with certain thoughts and feelings, ideas, and you just won't let it go because you get so preoccupied with something because it's better than being preoccupied with these other things. And that's where I think that's where our lives get stagnant, because we get stuck in these mental and emotional feedback loops, and we think that they're helping us. We think that they're somehow giving us some sense of something to do. And it does give them something to do, but a lot of the time it's not healthy for you. And I think that's what's happened to us through evolution, is that we developed all of the basic things that we needed to survive, and then certain things happened, whether it was because of the use of certain plants or certain dietary changes or whatever it was, that just led to our brains developing things that partly were needed for self-preservation, but also then became tools for the development of culture and society that actually in the end became really toxic for us. So I don't know, sometimes I just kind of don't know what to think about. I don't know how to feel about this world, and I don't know what to think about it. I like it, but I hate it. I love it, but I hate it. You know, especially when it comes to social media and the internet and modern world, and how people have changed over the course of my lifetime. How, you know, I've seen generations that I kind of grew up with, kind of that those people of the, you know, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, you know, they're all, most of them are gone, or they're, you know, getting on years now, and you know, they're a dying breed, and in some ways, sometimes people might say, well, that might be a good thing, perhaps in terms of political direction and things like that. I don't know, or in terms of like technological pressures and sort of societal kind of norms, and I don't know, but sometimes I think that my generation and the generations of the last couple of decades really just, I don't know, I just think that they're not really bringing much to the table anymore. They're not. We've lost so many of the things that kind of made people more interesting, because they were more not emotionally unavailable per se, but just a bit more stoic, a bit more resilient than us, a bit more, in some ways perhaps a little bit more carefree, a bit more less obsessed with all the things that the younger generations are obsessed with, like technology and bigger questions and woke kind of political kind of things. I guess in the end it's like that song, isn't it, by Queen, you know, was it all worth it? Was you know, the thousands of years of human evolution worth it? You know, was it worth it for my family tree to have ended up with me and my siblings? You know, was it worth it for technology over the last few centuries to have ended up where we are? You know, was it worth it that we developed technologies that are probably going to be the very things that end up killing us? You know, is it what all these trillions of dollars every year being spent on space research and, you know, exoplanet research, or is it worth it? Is it all going to be worth it in the end? It's not going to be worth it for me, because I'll be 6 foot under within a few short decades probably. So it's like, it's not going to be beneficial to me. Who does it really benefit in the end? You know? Because every generation is going to face their own issues relative to their time, but kind of, you know, like similar to those of the past, but just with a more modern take to it. You know, what will the 21st century be remembered for? You know, what will my generation be remembered for? You know, have we really achieved anything? Have we made our mark? You know, have we done anything? Have we said anything that mattered? Have we inspired and motivated anybody? You know, have we truly made a difference to the planet? Have we truly made a difference to our species overall? You know, what legacy are we going to leave behind? You know, do future generations really have a future? You know, will it all be worth it? Has it been worth it? Is it worth it? And will it all have been worth it? maybe it's the truth that just the bottom line of it is that overall the universe is just antinatalist. It's just it seems probably that it's going to collapse in some form or other. At some point, it's going to obviously meet its own demise at some stage. So but why? Why have a beginning? Why have an ending? Why have anything? What? Why have anything at all? Why have any subatomical particles or anything at all that can create the kind of the platform that a universe can, or whatever it is that lies behind the evolution of the processes that led to the Big Bang, or at least our Big Bang anyway, our universe. Why? Or what's the why? That's all I can say. I can't think of anything else to say. Just why? You can say how, but why though? Why is it there? What is it doing there? What is the point of it? What is the point of life? What is the point of anything being anything, of anything being what it is? Why did I have to be born? Why did I have to become the person that I am? Why do we have to suffer so much? Why do we have to go through so much misery in this world, in this life? And is that the only way to achieve anything? Is that the bottom line of this, that without misery, without suffering, you can't have anything? There is no future without misery. There is no future. There is no change. There is no innovation. There is no wisdom. There is no positivity. There's no optimism. There's no hope without misery and suffering. Without struggle, without challenge, without frustration, without anger, without disappointment. We're all going to die anyway at some point. So sometimes you just think, well, I don't really matter, do I? My life doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't matter to anybody. Sometimes I don't really think it really matters that much to myself, to be honest. So what? You get old, okay. So what? Okay, you die. So what? There is no eternal life. Okay, so what? The universe is going to end. Okay, so what? The planet's dying. People are dying every day, right? Okay, so what? People have been dying every day since the dawn of mankind. It's like, I'm not trying to be cold-hearted there, but just being honest about it. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and reduce the issues of our planet. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, what does any of it really matter? What does it matter if there is change? If we do end diseases and find better medicines and cures and better technologies, and we save our planet, we save our environment, we become masters of our own galaxy. Okay, well then what? Because it's always that, isn't it? It's always that with humanities. Then what? What do we do after that, and after that, and after that? Because we're never satisfied in this world. We're never, ever, ever, ever satisfied. It's always the next thing. The next one, the next one, the next one. And I think the reason for that is because there is no true spirituality in this world. There is no true sense of real euphoria in this world, apart from very tiny glimpses of bits every now and again of feeling content at times and feeling a bit more happy and joyous and upbeat. But they don't, like I said, they're so short-lived that you might as well not bother having them, because then all of the suffering gets amplified even more, because you've had that contrast. There's a reason why so much music hits us, I think, and art hits us, is because we see that. we see the antinatalist sort of as elements or potential of it in literature, in art, in music, in films, and even in comedy in many respects. You know, we see the darkness, we see the despair, we see the kind of almost the pointlessness of who we are, of what we've become, of where we're going. Almost this apathetic, I don't know what you call it, this like apathetic aspect to life, this sense of nothing matters. Nothing matters. Nothing we do matters. Nothing we've done really matters. None of it's really worth it. None of it's really truly. None of it matters in the end. It doesn't matter. Within a few short decades, we're all going to be dead and buried. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a shit? Whether the world has any kind of meaning or purpose. It's like, do you have time? I mean, sometimes I catch myself doing that. It's like I make these videos, but I think like, why am I doing it? Does anybody give a shit? Does anybody give a fuck about what I have to say? Probably not. And if they do, okay, great. Like, but then what? You know, again, that then what thing of just that never-ending need for something else, that craving for more and more and more, that need for indulgence of something. That's where we are. That's where we're going as well. As a species, we're heading towards more and more overindulgence in just about everything. And I think that's partly why, this whole thing of you will have nothing and be happy, this whole sentiment by, I think is it the part of the UN and the WHO and everyone else, it's like you'll be satisfied with less and less. You will do less and less to save the planet. You will do less and less to protect other people. That's why we're heading for that. I don't think we are heading for anything particularly spectacularly optimistic or hopeful, I don't think. If you can find what you think is some kind of peace, whether you're being delusional or it's just a cope, then I would say go for it, because that's the only thing you've got in the end in this world, I would say. And even then, you don't even really have anything. Everything's transient. Everything's going through. Everything has its time. Everything changes. Nothing ever lasts forever, no matter how much you try. Even the sun will disappear in the future. Even our solar system will fall apart. Even our galaxy will cease to exist at one time in the long distance, and the universe eventually will collapse. Will die, or at least go through an extremely long period of essentially more or less practically nothingness. Now, whether it bounces in whatever theory you want to look at in terms of whatever the future might be for the universe, it's certainly going to change, and the things that we kind of the parts of the universe that we consider to be the universe will be gone. Now thankfully we won't have to be there for that, but just as a poignant thing to say, really, that it does matter that we confront that, I think, because it means that there's an impermanence to everything. There is that life doesn't really matter. Yeah, life can happen, existence can happen, but it doesn't matter whether it does or not. There's no, I guess sometimes it's like there's no real reason for life to exist. There's no real reason for the universe to be what it is. It just is what it is. I mean, I don't know if that's the ultimate truth or whether there's more to behind it, but that's how it feels to me sometimes. And because of that, that makes me think, well, if that is all there is to it, and all of this religious, philosophical rhetoric shenanigans that we cling on to, it's just a waste of time. Then what are we doing? Why are we? I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should just fucking just nuke ourselves or whatever and just be done with it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that sometimes you just find yourself saying, why are we bothering? But then you could say, well, why not? Why not? Out of the two options, which one is the best, I guess. I'm not sitting here saying I want to die. I'm not saying I want to be shot, but I'm just saying you just go through these times where you have these very dark existential questions and you start thinking to yourself, is there any purpose to any of this? Is there any point to it? Is there truly any beneficial outcomes of what we're doing here? Are we really making a difference? Is our very existence immoral? Is it unethical for us to be alive? Is it immoral for us to be taking resources out of the ground and destroying ecosystems and vulnerable natural environments just to sort our own needs, to sort our own lack of fulfillment and contentment, and to fill us with some various techniques of coping because we're bored, because we can't function without something or other to give us some sense of purpose or meaning in this life. Because essentially that's all it really comes down to. I'm going to go here. I know it's been a long video, but at the end of the day, we really just cling on to things that actually in the end don't really mean anything. It doesn't really matter. It might mean something to you in the short term, whether it's a few seconds, a few minutes, a few days, a few years, whatever, a few weeks, but I think when you look at the bigger picture, you step back every now and again, and you just take a deep breath, and you look around and say, yes, I'm glad to be alive. I'm happy that in some ways that I am who I am, and I'm lucky and fortunate to not be other people that are going through much worse things. But you can't help but avoid, you can't just avoid those philosophical parts of the mind. It's like your mind craves answers, it craves knowledge, it craves patterns, it wants to recognize things, it wants to have a concrete block of something, it wants something solid to cling on to. And I think it's because, psychologically speaking, those things that we need a sense of spirituality, we need a sense of mental foundation, a mental kind of walking stick, if you like, and a kind of a mental aid, a mental assistant to, as a kind of fuel, as a kind of, partly as a fuel for curiosity, but also as a kind of mechanism to which our minds can kind of deal with the reality of the world, especially when things are going wrong in our lives, have gone severely wrong, when we're going through really traumatic experiences and difficult parts of our lives, whether that's because we're going through a transition or phase, or someone's passed away, or your car's broke down, or just having a bit of a bad spell. It's like we all find ourselves at times just thinking, this just isn't for me. I don't mean that as in being suicidal, but like, are you going to kill yourself? I don't mean like that. I just mean like, sometimes you just wish you could just switch it off. You could just wish you could just teleport yourself somewhere else. You could just wish you could move your mind somewhere else, or be somebody else for a day. Because you can't escape it, can't you? You can't escape who you are psychologically, emotionally. That is you. The body does what the body does, the brain does what it does, but the mechanisms, all the complicated, complex interplay of the brain, and how that creates consciousness and awareness of itself, and all of the complex neuroscience that's going on, that creates the thing that we call the mind. You can't just escape it. That's what makes life so incredibly difficult to tolerate sometimes. And so I don't blame people for, jumping on various coping bandwagons and turning to drugs and dealing with life in the way that they think is the best suited for them. I get it. I understand. I'm just saying, but just be aware of it. Just admit that that's what you're doing, and don't pretend that you're actually happy. You just, in the end, you're just coping. Really, you just think you're happy. You think you're content, but often, for the most, I would say, in fact, probably even for pretty much everybody, it's not always. Things aren't always what you think, and sometimes you're just living in a state of mental survival, and you just don't realise it. And with that, I'm gonna bring this video to an end. So I thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry it's been a long one. I hope you've found the video interesting in some sense, in some way, and I will catch you again on another video at some point in the near future. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye bye.